What's up, everybody? I'm Reverend Nia.
I'm Minister Wallace.
My name is Reverend Tiff, and welcome to Millennial Conversations.
Millennial Conversations is a Bible study specifically for young adults where we teach through dialogue and have candid conversations from an emerging generation of leaders.
Be sure to repost and share with the hashtag RTMC. That means Read Temple Millennial Conversations. And don't forget to engage with us in the chat.
You can tune in to our Read Temple website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel every Thursday at 7 p.m. So grab your pens,
grab your notebooks,
and join us for tonight's rap session.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Millennial Conversations. We are so excited to see you here as we close out the month of June, dialoguing with millennial men. So before I move on, don't forget to share using the hashtag RTMC. Don't forget to share and repost using the hashtag RTMC. So this evening, we are being joined by the wonderful Reverend Dr. Curry Butler Jr., and I am going to let him introduce himself before we move into him discussing his doctoral work. Thank you, Dr. Curry Butler, Reverend Dr. Butler Jr.
Thank
being
you.
here.
I have so many names. All right, so thank you for having me tonight. My name is the Reverend Dr. Curry F. Butler Jr., and the F stands for founder of I Live Ministries. There we go. That's me.
Thank you. So nice and sweet and to the point. We like it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for introducing yourself. So your doctoral work is around helpful ways to reconnect youth and young adults back to the pew. And I think that in order for us to do that, we have to understand first what has separated them from the pew. So in your research, can you tell us some of your findings, like some of the biggest reasons why there has been such a disconnect with youth and young adults as it relates to church attendance and participation?
Well, first you have to understand that youth and young adults stop going to church when they go off to college for the most part. That's one of the big reasons why. They are separated from the church and they're away at school and no one reaches out to them. They're just out there by themselves. And so most of the time they don't come back home and go to church. They do what they do while they're still in school and where they are in the city or the town that they are going to school in. Another thing that separates us from the church is the disconnect. It's a huge gap generationally. Each generation speaks a different language.
Right.
So the older saints don't talk the way millennials talk, and millennials don't really talk the way young people talk, and so forth and so on. So there's a quote unquote language barrier that's there that needs to be addressed. Then you also have the older saints who really want to keep control of everything, and they won't let youth and young adults stand up and lead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why would I want to go to a church where I'm not welcome?
Right.
Like, why would I go to a church where I know I have a business degree, but I can't do anything with the finance ministry? Or I know that I have a leadership degree or an education degree, and I can't even teach Sunday school because these positions are, I think the word is covenant. They are coveted. They are hoarded for the people who already have them. And that keeps people away. Why would I want to go to a church where I can't even be a part?
Right.
Also, when it comes to young adults, we go to where young adults are. So why would I want to go to a church where I don't see people that look like me? That also means that 9 times out of 10, there's no life in the church. There's no life. And because there's no life, we don't want to be there. So those are the main reasons why young adults don't want to go to church. Then you have like the fact that we don't feel accepted. You know, we don't feel like we're free to worship God the way we want to worship God. There's limited inclusivity, if any, inside the church. There's sexism in the church. We still live in a world where churches have all male reviews when it comes to revivals and pulpiteers or people who are doing the worship service. Women are still not included.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a horrible thing. Why would I want to go to a place where I'm oppressed? Because if I'm oppressed, then I'm gonna be depressed. If I'm depressed, I'm gonna be stressed. And I'm no good.
Mm.
So that's the real reasons I believe why young adults, millennials, don't go to church.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for breaking that down in terms of even talking about when we go away to college, right?
Yeah.
Like, and what that bridge looks like in between, but also a lot of churches are still struggling to identify the difference between youth and young adults.
Yes.
So I think that adds to the disconnect, while also having poor succession plans. So people covet positions for a long time, and then they're wondering who's going to take this over. And it's like, well, nobody now. But also,
Right.
it's also that it's like no one is going to take it over, and we also didn't have the training in place for someone to be able to successfully take it over. And we were talking about mentorship, and mentorship is a big key factor in this. Like, what does mentorship look like in these spaces so people, youth and young adults, want to move into these
Right.
next positions, especially as the world is changing,
Yeah.
and the church seems to be on a slow and steady
Dollar.
right? They still on.
Yeah.
They still putting the CD-ROM in the tower and the floppy disk, while we running on Wi-Fi hotspots, and next is going to probably be 3D imaging, right?
Right.
It's already happening.
I got one better. We're still calling the operator.
Ooh. Are we still using Morse code too?
Dun, 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 all that. That's what we're doing. Tapping away.
Right. And so you said something interesting earlier. You listed several points. One of the things you said, that there is no life in the church.
Yes.
Would you mind explaining this a bit more? Because I think when people hear of no life in the church, it becomes very general, and people are just like, what do you mean? Do you mean like it's not exciting? Do you mean like the praise and worship doesn't have not fog lights? Well, there are fog lights, fog machines and beaming lights. Like, when you say no life in the church, can you give us more of a specific breakdown of what do you mean by that?
We're on life support. The church is on life support. I work in the hospital. I'm a chaplain at the VA hospital. I guess I can say that out loud. And I go to the ICU, and I visit people, veterans who are hooked up to these machines, and tubes are coming from everywhere. And they're on the tubes and the machines because CPR has basically done its toll. You can keep pushing and make compressions on a fragile body for as long as you want to until the bones start to break. It's hard for them to breathe on their own. And so you have these tubes and this machine hooked up to them, and it breathes for them. But slowly but surely, the body is decaying. And I think that's what has happened to the church. We are on life support. She is on life support. And we have done a lot of life-sustaining interventions. We've had conference after conference, right? But the problem still happens. We've had prayer meeting after prayer meeting, but the problem is still there. We've had YPD explosion after YPD explosion, but the problem is still there, right? And it's there because the church doesn't really lack the resources, but the church lacks the ministries who are there to be there to bring people in and sustain and grow what's already there. The preachers, we educated now.
Mm-hmm.
We all got master's degrees. Like that's nothing new. Most of us are going back to get our doctorate degrees. We educated. We got all the education and all the practicums and all this stuff. But what good is all of that when we're put in a position where there are no young people in the church?
Right.
I heard somebody say that when you don't hear a baby crying, that's an indication that your church is on life support.
Right. Oh, yep. I've heard that too.
Because there's no one there to carry on the legacy. You don't have viable ministries to help young adults who have kids who need an outlet for them to grow and to learn and to get to know God. You don't have a place for the young men to go and talk to other mentorship, talk to men who've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and then give advice. You don't have a women's ministry there who they can actually help the young women filter through and fight through and decipher all the stuff that they're going on. There's nothing there for the young adult family. And because there's nothing there for the young adult family, the young adults go somewhere else. The kids, they have to be there, because mama and them bring them, grandmama and them bring her grandkids to church, and they participate. They up there doing Easter speeches and everything. But once they get old enough, are they still going to want to go? There's only so much church punch and cake can really do.
Yeah, man, and I agree, because when I hear what you are mentioning, I'm thinking like this. It sounds like programming,
Yes.
So it's like if the women's ministry does a program, then that means that they've sufficed the need for some type of connectivity or bridging the generational gaps. But it was one event. It was one program. It doesn't necessarily say that, beyond your program in September, what about the rest of the months of the year when some young woman might need somebody to come alongside her, or even, and the same goes for men or the young adult men or men's ministry as well. And so I think at some point we have to go beyond creating a program or this programmatic thrust as it relates to doing ministry work. And then using that as a litmus test to say, oh yeah, we have a thriving young adult ministry because you had one event. No, that does not mean you have a thriving young adult ministry. We have a thriving youth ministry, but you had one event and maybe half of a Bible study. That's not a thriving youth ministry.
And popcorn.
Right. Youth night and popcorn, exactly. And so at some point, like you said, the church has to certainly put the resources behind putting the right people in place to keep the momentum. That's what I'm hearing.
Yep.
To keep the momentum, not just we have a program and then it's nothing until the next program. No, something that's on a continuum that will allow for spiritual growth and development, but also will continue to allow for everyone to continue to be the beloved community beyond just one program.
Exactly.
I think that model even would work even as it relates to that college student range that you say is certainly missing because nobody is ministering to them, because there's not a model, because there's not somebody actually going to the colleges that or basically keeping connectivity with those who have gone away to college, regardless of where they go. It's like, if you keep a pulse on them while they're there, that further increases the likelihood of their return. Does that mean it will automatically return? No, we're not saying that. But what we're saying is by establishing that connectivity, it will allow then a greater possibility for their return. And then when they have, create their own families and then raising new families, and then the cycle continues and it remains a continuum.
So like as you were talking, I started thinking about another reason why the church is on life support is because we don't go out the four walls of the church.
I was about to say that. Yep, agreed.
We don't go outside. As long as you, Aunt Sue, and Mom and them, all right, then it's fine. But no, what about the man on the corner who needs food? Or what about, the athletic department at the local high school? Or what about mental health issues running rampant through the community? What about going out into the community and reaching people?
Exactly. And
showing love, right?
And also adding to that, there are so many campus ministries, and a lot of churches would do well if they partnered with the ministries that are already on campus, because most of the time those campus ministries are being led by young adults, right? And so I remember I remember how I got to Reed Temple was the shuttle bus that came to University of Maryland College Park. And I know they had a bus for Howard and I believe Bowie and other campuses. Hey, Bowie State. But that relationship, they built a relationship with where the young adults are and where we will be, also having that opportunity for giving us the choice and a decision to make, but they could say, at least we offered it, right? And this is what we're doing, but also having things that are consistent. Like, listen, after 6 p.m. service, they had dinner, okay? When I was an undergrad, let me tell you something. I was eating like pizza from the diner. Okay. So getting a nice cooked meal, I'll come anytime you need me here, because you gonna have mac and cheese and a roll, and I don't gotta eat pizza today. So, it's going outside the four walls, but it also sounds like a struggle with people management, which has always been interesting to me because a lot of churches want to so bad structure themselves like the business world and the secular world, but won't put in the time necessary to actually have the accountability pieces in place to ensure effectiveness. Like a lot of organizations in the secular space are now hiring people management directors. Literally, it is a job now, right? And it's like, what would that look like if the church, who is expected to be the best people managers, actually put in the time and the resources necessary to do that? And also not being a church that just says we want youth and young adults, but actually putting in the resources and the time and the support to support youth and young adult ministries. Young adults like hanging out. So when we're trying to ask, for example, for a bowling event, and we're getting fought about minuscule things, right? But yet we don't got no young adults. Well, y'all never let us do nothing. Right. And every time we, give an example of something we want to do, it's always, I understand asking the good questions, but now your questions are becoming less helpful in terms of planning and moving forward, and more so critique based on something you either couldn't do, something you couldn't accomplish, or something you're not accomplishing now. And so, looking at that and moving forward, because it is titled Forward Movement, right? I think it's important for people to know too, what are the tools and resources, and you don't got to give away all your resources, but what are the tools you use in finding this information? Because people don't believe it's real. And sometimes they need to know, oh, I got this from the Pew Center research. And it's like, you don't need Pew Center research. You could just talk to everybody you could just talk to the people that don't show up no more, right? But what are some of the ways that you got these findings, that you got these y'all know what I'm saying? How did you get these findings?
Yeah. So I did surveys and interviews for one. And so I think going back at the same time, moving forward, I think that the church has to be intentional. One thing that bothers me to my core, don't ask me questions when my input is not going to be used. Stop doing it. Stop doing it. Sometimes churches really, all they do it's they bring the little small group of young adults they have together, and they ask them questions, right? And they have, oh, how do we make church better? How do we do this? How do we make an impact? What do you need? And then we give them the answers, and then 2 months later, we still in need. We still hurting. We still need healing. We still got all these needs that we told you about. We still be needing it. We still be needing it. And so, like, that's a problem. Intentionality. You have to. I had to work with a team too, though. Work with my close friends to actually put together intentional questions so I can get some real relevant answers. Once I did that, I used with SurveyMonkey and Google. Google has a whole suite of stuff, right?
They do.
Like Google is like lit, really, for real. People don't give enough credit. Microsoft Office is good, but Google Suites.
Yes.
Man,
the entire suite of Google. Yes.
Man, hey, if the church would get a hold of that, they'll be set for real, for real. So we got together the questions, and I started I'm on Facebook, and I started inboxing people on Facebook Messenger. Will you answer these questions for me? Will you participate in this survey? Will you come together for this this group? I forgot what you call it now because I'm talking, right? So like you bring people together and it's like a group interviewing process, and they're open and honest with you about the questions that you're asking. That's where the majority of my relevant feedback came from. But then you have all other avenues like books and journals and articles, like all these things are out there for the church to use, all these resources.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the main one really is social media.
Yep.
If you look on any young adult social media page, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, I don't know, people should be tweeting, but Twitter, Snapchat, or anything else, right? Reddit, I don't know.
Instagram.
There we go, Instagram. They'll tell you what's important. We will tell you what's important to us by our stories, by our statuses, by what we like, what we don't like. All these things are out there for the church to look at, grab hold to, and use to their advantage. But no, we don't want to. We want to go to meetings and stuff.
Carrie, you feel some type of way about me?
Carrie said he's tired of the meetings. And I hear you, because meetings are becoming a waste of time.
Church folk be meeting.
Just be meeting. They meet about the meeting.
Yes.
Without actually sitting down. And this has always been one of my biggest issues and struggles and pain points. It's like, we can meet all day, but why don't we actually use that meeting time to do actionable work? Why don't we use that meeting time to actually be forward moving, right? Because all we're going to do is just talk around in circles and come back, like you were saying, months later, and nothing was done.
Nothing.
And now we're just like, how do we do this? And it's like the answers were already there. And so that's why it was important for you to share your findings, because it highlights the importance of listen to the people and listen to what they're saying when they're saying it, and stop bringing people together just to say it, because now you're on your last leg.
Yes. And ain't no amount of money gonna
bless
save
you.
Bless you.
Bless you. And ain't no amount of money gonna save you unless you use the resourcing in the correct and appropriate manner and way. And so moving into my next question, right? So one of the things that has been happening in the world is hybrid learning, hybrid working, work from home. Young adults are working from Zanzibar. Okay.
What is that?
it's a place that you could go to vacation. But basically, people are working from home, which means that they are working from wherever.
Yes. Zanzibar. Hey, let's go.
Listen, Zanzibar it is.
Yeah.
But people are finding that hybrid is just like the most useful. And so how can a hybrid experience prove to be helpful to connecting youth and young adults back to the pews?
Let's be honest. When we see youth and young adults in church, what are they doing?
On their phone.
They on their phones, right?
Listen, sometimes I be
somebody on their phone right now, right? They on the phone, right? Texting away or scrolling away or reading. People actually read, so reading away, right? On their phones. And the best place to catch a young adult is where the young adults are. And it's really not going to a place. It's really not about you having open mic night, which I love those, right? But it's also about meeting them where they are, and we on this phone. Mm-hmm. On this phone, we have apps, and we can go and watch YouTube videos all day long and not have cable TV, because that's where we are. That's what we do. So in order for the church to actually reach young adults, there has to be some kind of meeting place for the church to actually meet us. And that's through social media, not through those spam texts that some churches are doing, but through actual social media. Meet us where we are, right? And I think that the thing that really helped us usher into this futuristic now is the pandemic.
Yep.
Now, some churches, so I wish that the pandemic would have created a level playing field for churches, big churches, small churches, medium churches, right? But at the same time, I feel like it didn't. It didn't, because you still have the bigger churches with all the resources and the smaller churches struggling to create Zoom or to struggle to learn how to use a camera or all this stuff. But that's another story. So the best way to meet us is on this app, whether Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, like we talked about earlier, or Snapchat. Your church has to have a way for us to experience God without actually being inside the four walls.
And so to your point though, because I know your doctoral research talked about how hybrid model might get them back to the pew. So how, what does that look like in terms of even what is promoted or produced via social media that would still in turn cause them to potentially come back to the pew? Taking point, Millennial Conversations is fully virtual. Mm-hmm. Because of course with the pandemic and everything else, we had to come from doing in-person recordings to now doing virtual recordings or whatever. And so it's strictly social media. It comes on Facebook, YouTube, and the church's website. And so how can that then translate or parlay into the young adults seeing Millennial Conversations? And I'm using us as an example because, if this is going to help us, this is what we're going to use to help us, thanks to your doctoral dissertation work.
Amen.
So what would then help me as a young adult watching Millennial Conversations on a Thursday? I like what it had to say. It met me where I was. How does that then translate to me going to Reed Temple on a Sunday morning for a 9:30 service?
Options and availability.
Accessibility. I was thinking about that too. Yep.
Yes, that's the word. Accessibility.
Say more.
Look at God. So options. When you go to, there's a meme of a lady putting up the cookout for the first time, and she's looking at the menu. She's squinting, like, what in the world do I see? What do I want to order? The church needs to have options. Young adults We love options. Don't try to put us in a box like you do everything else. We are not supposed to be in a box like them hymnals that y'all don't be using. We need options. We can't be boxed in. You know, we get claustrophobic. We need options, right? And we have to have the option to go to worship, go to church, and be around people if we want to. But we also need the option to, you know, I hate to say it, but maybe I want to go to Bedside Baptist today, but still enjoy Reed Temple. Like, what if, because honestly, the same God that's in Reed Temple is the same God that's on this phone. The same God that's available through social media, the same God that's available all over the world. It's amazing, and this is the good thing about technology. The Holy Spirit moves the same way, period, right? The Holy Spirit moves. So the Holy Spirit that's in Reed Temple is the same Holy Spirit that I feel and it's transforming my life when I go back and watch a recording of the service where everybody just popped off. Now I'm being delivered, I'm being set free, I'm popping off, but I'm popping off on my phone, right? So the options is good, but also accessibility. We live busy lives. We don't always have time to stop and go to Bible study at 7 o'clock. We don't always have time we don't have time to get the kids ready, feed them, make sure our wives or husbands are taken care of, and get to church on time all the time. That's not how it is. Life gets in the way. Life can be inconveniencing. Life is just, life be lifing, right? And so I need to be able to catch God, experience God, get a word from God, get fed conveniently. Sounds bad, but it's true.
No, it sounds absolutely correct. Because what I'm thinking about too, as you're talking, are that there are churches who are made up primarily of youth and young adults and families.
Right.
And it's because they have been able to match the times that we are moving in. And a lot of traditional churches, they forget that the structure that was built for them was based on what was happening in that current environment at the time. So where there was a generation where women were not working, it is completely different now when women are some of the highest educated people in the country, leading in different spaces and different avenues as well. So it sounds also like there just needs to be a lot of shifting that needs to take place where people make room and space for all generations, but also understanding that times are changing. But I also think too, the church has had a way of making people fearful of sitting down and resting. Right? So why we have a lot of people coveting positions, it's because we have told them you got to continue to work, but also a lot of historical things that I won't go into, but basically based on what you were saying, just thinking about it, that we know that there are churches, like you were saying, convenience. It's not a bad thing at all. The church can remain the same and also move with the times. Like, you don't have to change everything you're doing. You just have to pivot and shift your thinking about how different things are done. For example, you could go to All Nation Worship DC. They ain't lacking with young adults at all. You know, you can go to Chania, what's that, Howard John Wesley Church in Virginia. I can't think of it.
Alfred Street.
Alfred Street, right? And they have made space for young, and it is a traditional setting, church, right? But they've learned how to pivot to provide consistent programming for every generation. You watch a service and they had First Baptist of Glenarden, right? And I'm only saying churches in this area because that's all I know. Like, if you got churches in Augusta, Georgia, please feel free. Please feel free. But you know, it's not even about convenience, it's about meeting the needs of the people. And as a church, we have been called to serve and meet the needs of the people. So you got young adults who are parents. What's going on with your youth ministry and daycare? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. And like, so Tom Rainer, I forgot which book
I was going to mention that book, The Autopsy of a Deceased Church.
Well, not that one, but
Oh,
that book too.
About that one earlier.
Yeah, I used that one too.
That book too.
You know, the whole life support thing. That was partially me, but that was inspired by him. But he has another book about post-pandemic worship, or something dealing with the post-pandemic church, right? And he said, basically, during the pandemic, people were forced to be at home. They were in quarantine. The church was forced to cater to people during quarantine. Now that we're quote unquote back open all over again, the same people who were used to being fed during quarantine at home in their pajamas, all of them are not coming back to church on a regular, consistent basis. They're not. They're just not going to, because they got used to being at home. They got used to church being convenient. Now, honestly, I get it. But also I found out through my research, through asking young adults, they love the fact that church is accessible, right? But at the same time, most of them, not all of them, but most of them want to feel the life of another human being while worshiping God, together, like inside of the building. It does something for them, but at the same time, they might not be able to make it to church on Sunday morning. And so churches have to evolve from just being so one-dimensional. And that's where the whole hybrid thing comes in. That's where the whole hybrid church comes in, to be multifaceted, multi-dimensional, to have more than one way of reaching not just young people, but God's people, period. Got to. If not, we're going to continue to be on life support until finally our organs going to start failing. Churches going to start closing. And once churches start closing, denominations get smaller and smaller and smaller. And guess what? They're going to turn to the same people who they refused to turn to while they were alive and well. And that's where we are. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's where we are. I digress.
Well, thank you so much, Rev. You certainly did answer the question. And we're certainly grateful for the doctoral dissertation work that you've done as it relates to youth and young adults leaving the pew and what we can do to get them back to the pew, and even using a hybrid model to do so. And just understanding that not everybody just wants everything to be virtual. There are some who would, in essence, prefer the option. If I want to worship at home today, I want to worship at home today. But also when I want to be in the fellowship with the brethren, then I can also go to service on Sunday morning. And so thank you for your expertise and for sharing in this space. So if you're tuning in tonight and you do not have a relationship with Lord Jesus Christ, no one has ever introduced you to Jesus, and you are unsaved, you're unsure if you're saved, or maybe you don't even know what it means to be saved, I invite you to type in the chat, it's me. Maybe you're already saved, but you don't have a church home where you are growing, not just where you are going. But as we even mentioned tonight, a lot of times we can go to church and not even grow because we just have programs, but no momentum. And so if you're tuning in tonight and you are looking for a church home where you can grow and not just go to, and you believe the Lord is leading you to the Reed Temple AME Church, I want you to make a bold faith move and type in the chat, it's me. Maybe you're already saved and have a church home where you are growing, but you need to recommit or rededicate your life back to Christ. What does that mean? I'm glad you asked. That means that you and Jesus had a wonderful relationship, but y'all broke up. You ain't like something he said, you ain't like something he did, and so you decided, I'm chucking up the deuces, I'm leaving God. Your saving grace, our saving grace, is that God has never left God's position and has been waiting for you to come back, to be back in right relationship with God. And so if that's you tonight and you're saying, I've tried this thing called life independent of God, and now I want to live this life, this thing called life depending upon God. If that's you tonight, I want you to make a bold faith move and type in the chat, it's me. Maybe you're still growing in your faith, and that's perfectly fine. Head on over to www.readtemple.org/cares, and someone will most certainly be in communication with you. Last and certainly not least, if you would like to sow a seed into the life of this ministry, not just Millennial Conversations, but that of Reed Temple AME Church, so that we can continue to work with the Lord in the church as well as in the community, I will that you would follow the directions that are on your screen at this time and sow a seed into the life of this ministry. No matter how great, no matter how small, whatever you give, just do so with a cheerful heart. Thank you again so much to the Reverend Dr. Curry F. Butler Jr., and of course, our host for tonight, Reverend Tiffany Brooks, for being with us. Tune in next month. This is the closing of June, but tune in next month for another great, exciting Millennial Conversations with all new guests, all new topics. You don't want to miss it.